Hey guys, this is Max from AvidMax, and today we're going to be tying the Dolly Llama. This is a super popular pattern in Alaska. It's tied in a variety of different sizes and colors. Today we're going to be tying it a little bit smaller, and we're going to be tying it in black and white. We're going to be using the Firehole 413 in a size 8 and a Firehole 811 in a size 4. We got black rabbit strip and white rabbit strips from Hairline, and some Flashabou, a large silver cone head, and a black 6/0 Vivus thread. And we're going to use Dacron 20-pound backing as our trailer wire. When I get started, I'm going to take my rabbit strip with my size 8 in the vise, and I'm going to kind of measure the tail of my fly before I do anything else. So I want the tail to be about the length of the hook shank, and you can always change your size. Doesn't necessarily matter how long it is. Kind of depends on what size hook you're using. So I'm going to measure it out, and I'm going to part the rabbit fur on top where I kind of want that tie-in point to be. Peel or part the fur on top, and then I'm going to actually remove my hook from the vise. So when I remove my hook from the vise, I'm going to take the point of the hook and I'm going to pierce the rabbit hide right in the middle of where I had that fur parted. I'm going to go ahead and place that hook back in the vise with the rabbit strip hanging, and just kind of get it out of my way. Now I can take my thread and I'm going to start just behind the eye of the hook, make some wraps rearward to the curve of the hook. I'm going to go ahead and snip my tying thread. So I stop my thread about the point of where I think the barb would be on a barbless hook. Make a couple more wraps. Now I'm going to position my rabbit strip and I'm going to flip my fly upside down. So I flip the fly upside down and I put the hook in like this so that when I add the other rabbit strip of white underneath, it's going to be an even connection between the two hides, and the hook's not going to be getting in the way of the two pieces of rabbit. And it also kind of hides the hook. So once I kind of get that, the part that I combed back and parted, I'm going to make a couple loose wraps. So now I got that hook riding upside down, my rabbit strip. I'm going to pull that rabbit strip back. I'm going to continue my thread forward to just behind the eye of the hook. So once I get up to just behind the eye of the hook, I'm going to again part the rabbit strip, the rabbit fur. I'm going to tie it down with a couple loose wraps. And when I'm using a strong thread and tying big streamers like this, I'm going to actually use the thread on my fingers instead of using the bobbin. This allows me to just kind of manipulate things a little bit easier until I get a nice solid grab of where I want it. So once I got that, I'm going to peel that rabbit strip back again. I'm going to make a couple tight wraps just behind the eye, and then I can go ahead and whip finish. I'd snip my thread. So there's my trailer hook. So sometimes the fur gets kind of pushed all over the place, so I like to wet my fingers and kind of comb that fur back, and you can get quite a bit of moisture on there, and it'll help pull everything back and kind of clears up the eye of the hook. So now I'm going to take my backing, I'm going to slide it up through the eye, so I got a loop. I'm going to take the other piece of backing, like so. So now I'll kind of even up those two tag ends, and I'll be left with the two tag ends and a big loop. So with my loop, my tag end, I'm going to take those two tag ends through the loop one time. I'm going to go back around the outside loop, go back into the loop, and I'm going to do that one more time. So essentially I'm tying a figure 8 knot onto the eye of the hook. So I'm going to go ahead and cinch that down so it's nice and tight. Before I pull it out of the vise, go ahead and take a black Sharpie, and I'm going to hit about 2 inches or so of this backing to kind of just make sure it blends in a little bit better with the fly and hides that backing I used. A lot of people like to use a braid or maybe even trailer or intruder wire or something like that. I like the backing because I just feel like it has more movement and it just kind of works well with the rabbit. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove this piece from the vise. You notice I didn't snip my rabbit hide on this back trailer hook. Just going to leave that hanging. Now we're moving on to the front half of the fly. I'm going to be using that 811 in a size 4. Start my thread just behind the cone head. Make some wraps down the hook shank. Snip my thread, and then work all the way back to the curve in the hook. So same thing, I'm trying to measure my thread to about where I think the barb would be, because we're going to be snipping off the front hook on that size 4. So once I kind of got that backed up there, I'm going to take my backing. I'm just going to make a couple loose wraps, making sure that I keep that hook upside down. So once I make a couple of loose wraps, I'm going to kind of adjust it before I torque down. And you know, some people vary their distance. Since we are kind of sizing down, I'm just going to go about the length of the hook shank on the front hook. So be just like that. So kind of when I got it in place, I'm going to make a couple tight wraps just to make sure it doesn't move on me. I'm going to take my 2 pieces of backing, and we're going to slide up through the cone and go back down through the eye and then go back through the cone. So the problem with using backing is sometimes the ends like to fray. So wetting it always helps, and doing them one at a time instead of trying to do them together. Once I got both pulled through, I'm going to do the same thing, go one at a time, back down through the eye. Keeping those two on top. Kind of pull this one out of the way. And then I'm going to go back through that cone head again, one at a time. So by doing this, you're just adding extra security, so actually when there's a fish on it, or you're putting an extreme amount of tension, it's actually going to be dispersed to the eye of the hook as opposed to just being here on your thread wraps. So you're basically just creating like a double security system so that those thread wraps don't allow your backing to slide out. So I'll make some hard thread wraps, kind of build a thread body on that backing. Kind of cover up all that backing. I'm going to go ahead and snip out the tag ends of that backing. So my thread is all the way right at the spot where my barb would be. Now I'm going to peel over my strip of rabbit. And I'm going to kind of measure, same as I did before. And I'm going to part where I want my thread wraps to go. So at this stage, I really want to make sure that there's no tension built up on the actual rabbit hide. There's going to be only tension on the backing or the trailer part of the hook. So kind of measure that out, part the fibers. Sure it's laying down nice and flat. I'll make a couple loose wraps, keeping that rabbit hide on top. Do one more. And I can crank down on my thread. So again, peel back the rabbit strip. I'm going to make a couple tight wraps. I'm going to work my thread all the way up to behind the cone. Again, peel over my rabbit strip. I'm going to make turns away from me, and each turn I make, I'm going to kind of comb out or make sure that none of those fibers get trapped underneath the rabbit hide, and just kind of move them backwards as I wrap around the hook shank. With my wraps, I'm trying to overlap slightly with each wrap, so it kind of teases those hairs backward. Kind of moving all those fibers or fur out of the way till I get all the way to the front side, just right behind that cone. So I have my rabbit strip right behind the cone. If I kind of comb that hair back, you can see that there's a little bit of gap there. I want to try and make one more wrap to kind of force that rabbit up underneath the cone head so that it looks flush and you're not going to see those thread wraps once I finish the fly. Gotta pull it tight. Now I can take my thread, make a couple loose wraps. I'll take my thread and I'll make a couple tight wraps before I actually snip out that rabbit hide. So now that hair is coming flush out of my cone head, and I'm going to take my material brush and just kind of comb out all those loose fibers and get everything going back the right direction. Kind of hold that fur back, make a couple more tight wraps. Take my bodkin, kind of press, make sure that rabbit hide stays up underneath the cone. My next piece of material, I'm going to take a piece of white rabbit. I'm going to flip my fly upside down. You notice I've got this trimmed at an angle so that when I stick it up underneath that cone head, it'll grab a little bit easier. It's not going to build up a bunch of bulk in the cone head. So I kind of measure it so that it's right on the bottom. I'll make one loose wrap. One more loose wrap. Cinch it down a little bit. I'll take my bodkin again and I'll push a piece of rabbit hide up underneath the cone head. Now I can make a couple real tight wraps. Just kind of let that rabbit, I'm going to flip the fly back over. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my flash. I'm going to take that piece of Flashabou, make a loop around my tying thread, and I'm going to kind of gather it, keep tension, and start cinching it down right in the middle of the black and the white. So I can do the side closest to me now. Same thing, a little bit of tension, couple tight wraps, pull everything down. I can go ahead and whip finish my fly. Do about 3 or 4 turns. Sure it's nice and tight. Go ahead and snip my tying thread. So now I can kind of measure out where I want my flash to be. So about even with the tail of the black. Then I'll measure out that bottom piece of rabbit, doing the same thing. So I want it just a little bit shy of the end of the black. I'm going to cut that in an angle. So now when these two pieces of rabbit are laying against each other, they're going to lay flush and it's just going to swim that much better. Remove my hook from the vise. Take a pair of pliers. right back to behind the black rabbit, and I can go ahead and snip it. So when I do snip it with the pliers, it's going to shoot that bend of the hook somewhere very quickly, and you're going to want to make sure that you are not looking at it, or you do it in your, just away from your eyes. There you have it, Dolly Llama.
If you enjoyed the video today, make sure to give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see us tie in the future, please drop us a comment in the lines below. For more fly fishing and outdoor related videos, be sure to subscribe to the AvidMax YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you out there.